What's up, everybody? And thank you for tuning into the Skol State of Mind podcast. Within this video, we're going to do a deep dive on the comparison from the Mike Zimmer era versus the Kevin O'Connell era. Now, I understand that Mike Zimmer coached this team for 8 seasons and Kevin O'Connell only 4. But what actually sparked this whole conversation was this. Kevin O'Connell will be going into his 5th season as head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And it seems like some of the same issues and concerns we had under Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, we are still talking about today. So I asked the big question, what's changed? And has the Minnesota Vikings really progressed in any way? If not, let me know. But with all that being said, let's dive into it. One of the biggest concerns we have this offseason is quarterback. Now, the Minnesota Vikings have had quarterback issues for a long time. This dates before Kevin O'Connell and before Mike Zimmer. But if you look at the Mike Zimmer / Rick Spielman regime, they made a swung for the fence in bringing in Kirk Cousins as the last piece for a team that they felt was going to contend for a Super Bowl. We all know how that played out, and we don't really have to go into that too much. But when Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman got fired, I felt that the number one priority for the new regime coming in was to solidify the quarterback for the future. Now, we are going into year 5 under Kevin O'Connell, and we still have quarterback uncertainty. Now, this video isn't about how I feel about JJ McCarthy, because if you've been following me on this channel, you would know and understand that I'm a big McCarthy supporter. I think he can be the franchise quarterback of the future, but we have to call it for what it is. He has injury concerns. He's been in the league 2 seasons and he's only basically played 10 games. That's a huge concern, right? And that's why I have to put that, in the realm of quarterback uncertainty, because I watched the press conference yesterday. They didn't give a definite answer on how they felt about McCarthy. And we don't know what they're going to do to solidify this quarterback room. Are they going to make a big trade and sign for a huge name? Or are they just going to fill the quarterback room with some veterans so McCarthy can learn from them? We really don't know. But at the end of the day, it's still quarterback uncertainty. And I just feel like we've had these same issues with quarterback for some time now, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get fixed anytime soon. So let's keep it moving and let's talk about the offensive line. Now, under Mike Zimmer, the offensive line basically had 2 great bookends. You had a young, developing Christian Darrisaw. Brian O'Neill was emerging as a top right tackle in this league, but the interior of the offensive line was a problem. If you fast forward to this offseason, Kwesi, Adofo-Mensah, and Kevin O'Connell revamped the interior offensive line. They drafted Donovan Jackson in the 1st round, signed Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. Now, going forward, we don't know if Ryan Kelly will be on this team. There's a great possibility that he's going to retire. Now, if we look at Will Fries coming off a broken leg from the season prior, I can chalk that up as maybe, his body is getting back regulated, from the injury. And this was his 1st season from that horrific injury, right? That's being said. But if you actually look at it, deep, it's the same issues. It's the same offensive conundrum. It's the same issues all over again. Now, Brian O'Neill has gotten older. Christian Darrisaw has basically, been injured for a lot of his career, constantly being in and out the lineup. So there are issues with the offensive line. I would have thought by spending so much money within this offseason that we wouldn't have these same problems, but we do. So what's changed with the offensive line from Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman? Think about that one. Now, this one is kind of unique, and I got right here that says youth at quarterback, right? And I'm going to try to tie in the receivers also within this one topic. When Mike Zimmer got fired, we knew that Dalvin Cook was running out of gas. We knew that the Vikings were going to need a, up and coming, elusive running back for this team. Now, the Vikings traded for Jordan Mason last year. This is no slight against Jordan Mason, but I know what Jordan Mason is a 1B on this team. But the Vikings do actually need that young, athletic, elusive running back that can kind of, take a 60-yard run to the end zone. We don't have that on this team. We haven't had that since Dalvin Cook in his prime. And if I remind you guys, during Mike Zimmer, that's when Dalvin Cook basically started to show, a little bit of his decline that you need to draft a running back. So I asked the same question like I asked in the other two topics. What's changed? Because Aaron Jones has basically hit the age cliff. I'm not sure he will be back. He will probably have to come back on a highly reduced role, but they are going to need to go out and either sign a young running back or actually get one in the draft. Now, I'm going to tie in the receivers also within this topic, like I said earlier. During Mike Zimmer's regime, especially the last year, one talented and great receiver, Justin Jefferson. And that's the same guy you got now. Because we all seen, Jordan Addison get arrested again. We don't know if he's going to be on this team for the foreseeable future. We don't know at this point. This is not the Jordan Addison video. We're not going to dive into that right now. But the mainstay is still Justin Jefferson. So what has actually been added to this receiving room to make it better, right? I mean, we could be having a different conversation if we knew, Jordan Addison, wasn't going to get any harsh punishment, or, if we knew if the Vikings were actually going to re-sign Jalen Naylor going forward. But if you just look at it right now, the only receiver we have on this roster that's been consistent going forward, and it's the future for this team, still is Justin Jefferson. 4 years later. I'm just calling it out how I see it. And if you want to tie in the tight ends also, like the Vikings had a tight end problem with Mike Zimmer, right? Irv Smith could never become healthy. Tyler Gronklin didn't emerge as a starter that we wanted him to be. The Vikings go out and they trade, for TJ Hawkinson. He has, 1.5 good seasons, and he hasn't been the same player that we grown accustomed to. He's not being able to separate. And we have the issue of saying, oh, maybe it's just, he's chipping too much. We really don't know. But it's still an issue there. I mean, I would say the bright spot, Josh Oliver, but we don't know what Josh Oliver can do in that number one receiving role. Not number one receiving role, that number one tight end role. Sorry. So what's changed, right? Now, this topic right here about the defense it's kind of hard to kind of just say, versus Mike Zimmer or versus, Kevin O'Connell, because as of right now, when this video is recorded, we don't know what's going to happen with Brian Flores, right? So I'm going to just put it like this. If you look at all the tiers of the Vikings defense, the secondary, the linebackers, and the defensive line, they're aging, right? Your interior linebackers in Eric Wilson, who's actually a free agent this year, and Blake Cashman, they're already in their 30s, right? So you need to get younger there. As for the safeties, you really don't know what you have at safety. Harrison Smith has probably retired already. It hasn't been announced just yet, but we kind of can foresee that Harrison Smith will retire. So Theo Jackson, Jay Ward, and Josh Metellus. You really only have one player in Josh Metellus that we actually want to see, get on the field and play. So you need to upgrade your safety position. Now, as for the corners, Jeff Okudah probably won't be back. So you only have two corners on this roster that's playable. Byron Murphy and Isaiah Rodgers. So you have to get better there. You have to get more depth there. Now, the defensive line is a spot to where I feel is a strength for this team. And that's probably one of the main bright spots, I would say, in comparison from Zimmer to Kevin O'Connell. I mean, they have some older guys in Hargrave and Allen, but they also will have younger guys behind them in Redmond and um, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Tyre Ingram Dawkins, and even Elijah Williams. So I think the defensive tackles, defensive line is kind of solid, and that's been great, for the past season. And also the edge rushers with Bernard, Van Ginkel, and Dallas Turner. But if you look at the secondary and the inside linebackers, they need to get younger, and they're already there at that age cliff. Now, salary cap constraints. When Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell got to the team, one of the biggest issues outside of quarterback was the Vikings had salary cap issues. They had a lot of aging players on big contracts, and they needed to find a way to kind of smooth over the cap space and actually get cap compliant. Now, I hear there's word out there, and I look into it myself with the current state of the Minnesota Vikings salary cap as of right now, that they can probably, restructure one or two guys and get cap compliant, which isn't a big deal, but sometimes that leads to kicking the can down the road for multiple players. So that's something we still have to see, coming to fruition this offseason. But let's talk about this though. Let's talk about the coaching record, right? And if you heard me on Spaces and you heard me on any other podcast or live stream or whatever, like I make the comparison between Mike Zimmer and Kevin O'Connell with we gave Mike Zimmer a lot of gripe for making the playoffs every other season, right? It was like every other year they make the playoffs, a pop-up year, they lose or whatever, right? And I understand Kevin O'Connell has a smaller sample size from Mike Zimmer, but the pattern is leading into the same direction, right? Now, if you look at it with Mike Zimmer's first year, he finished 7-9, no playoff appearance. Second year, 11-5, lost in the playoffs, right? The next year, finished 8-8, missed the playoffs, right? And then the year after that, that's that magical season, 2017, finished 13-3, made the playoffs, won one game, lost the other game, right? So let's just pause it right there, right? That's Mike Zimmer's fourth season. So within the first four seasons of Mike Zimmer, the Vikings won a playoff game and was in the NFC title game, one game before actually making a Super Bowl, right? So things didn't work out. They bring in Kirk Cousins. The following year, they finished 8-7, no playoffs, right? Made the playoffs the next year, finishing 10-6 in the season, won a playoff game, lost one, right? So that's basically year 6 under Mike Zimmer. You have basically 3 playoff appearances every other year, and you have 2 playoff wins. Okay. Then this is where things get actual bad that actually kind of led to Mike Zimmer having his exit, right? You lose in the playoffs, and then you come back the next season, you finish 7-9, no playoffs, and then you finish 8-9, no playoff, which led to him getting fired, right? So, okay, cool. That's Mike Zimmer. Playoffs every other season. His last 2 seasons, no playoff appearances, but within the first 6 seasons, 2 playoff victories and actually a NFC title appearance. Okay, it's fair. So Kevin O'Connell comes in here. First year, 13-4, playoffs, lost. Second season, 7-10, no playoffs. All right. The next season after that, 14-3, playoffs, lost. Fourth year, no playoff. Isn't that similar to the same pattern with Mike Zimmer? And the one thing that is that pretty much like shines out to me is this. At least Mike Zimmer was getting playoff wins. And I know people are going to say, oh, it's only 2. Well, they finished with the bye in 2017, so they didn't have to play in the first round. And, they got to the end. They won the game, and they got to the NFC title game. And then the year 2 after that, when they made the playoff again, they won a playoff game. Kevin O'Connell has no playoff wins. So if history repeats itself, the Vikings will get in the playoffs next year, right? Let's just say that. The Vikings get into the playoffs next year, but what's going to happen? Are we going to have a playoff win, or are we just going to have another first round exit? I really don't know. And I'm gonna say it again. We gave Mike Zimmer a lot of gripe for making the playoffs every other season, and Kevin O'Connell is trending in that same direction. So we just have to call it for what it is. Now, that's pretty much all I got for y'all within this video. I just really wanted to come in here today and give you guys this in-depth video of how I felt about the comparison. And I do understand and know that there's other issues because concerning, both regimes that kind of led to, the record or, why things are like this or whatever. I get that. And if you have that and you want to explain that to me, you're more than welcome to hit me on social media or even get in the comments and let me know if I missed anything. But all I'm saying is I really feel like the Vikings haven't progressed in a direction that we wanted them to. I think we're having the same issues that we dealt with under Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman that we're dealing with right now with Kwesi, Adofo-Mensah, and Kevin O'Connell. And I didn't even want to deep dive too much on, the draft picks, because if you looked at, the last couple of seasons under Rick Spielman, he whiffed on a lot of draft picks too. And that's in comparison to Kwesi, because Kwesi has had, some draft busts under his belt also. So I'm just saying, like, I'm not sure if we actually really progressed. I think we kind of just changed the names and we are basically saying staying the same team right in the middle of the pack. So that's how I feel about it, y'all. Just have to throw that out there. Now, thank you guys. That's how I gotta end it. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's much appreciated. If you got anything else you want me to talk about, hit me in the comments, hit me on social media. Let's go.